And why Botafogo? Why do you believe in Botafogo?
Well, you saw my Instagram. I am a Botafogo believer. I will tell you, I'm not going to tell the fans it was my first choice in Brazil. I didn't think anybody would take on something as big as Botafogo. I was looking at Brazil, not because of a particular club. I think anybody paying attention knows among the best talent in the world comes from Brazil. Often routes through Portugal. I think Brazil, I think France, I think Africa is where you find the talent. I think when you marry that talent with, structure and systems and drilling and repetition and, I think amazing things come when you combine the technical and creative nature of players in this region with, time-tested models of, execution. So I think talent is what drew me to Brazil. I think that this decision the government made, which we've seen in other parts of the world, where associations create SADs in Portugal, or they've done something similar in Spain. I've seen how that doesn't work in different parts of the world, and I think the opportunity to be a part of it just as it's happening here is very compelling. In Portugal, they did this a long time ago, but the associations never really divorced themselves of the politics. So at Benfica, at Sporting, at FC Porto, you still have elected officials year in, year out that not only run the club, but also are expected to run the corporation. I think we've seen in the United States, the best way to get elected is just spending money in time for people to notice, so they vote for you to return to office. The same happens in football. And so it doesn't always result in the best business decisions. There's instability, there's debt, all the things that would kill a business seem to be the standard of doing business in world football in these situations where these associations have converted to SADs. I think what struck me about Brazil is how quickly I can't point this to an individual. I think I can point it to a movement. There's an embrace of, the stability, the capital, the support that can come from a business person that can change, the direction from a political organization to a commercial organization. The fans want to win. Yes, they like you to spend money on players. Feels good. It's like a sugar high when you spend a lot of money and you buy a player and everybody loves them. But players do like sustainability. They don't want to go backwards. They don't want relegation. It's the greatest part of our sport probably is relegation, the highs and the lows. But great clubs like Botafogo should never go backwards. And sometimes they do. So I think when I came to Brazil, I was looking for something that I thought would be easy, something I could handle. I've led big businesses, right? But I was looking at clubs in the first division that have very small fan bases because I wanted to come in and, rip up the business organizational sort of, the history of bad practices and market more effectively, build new channels of revenue. Soccer's really limited. Even the best, Manchester United, others have, TV, tickets, and merchandise. It's all they do. But the greatest economic opportunities that come from these clubs that have incredible loyal fan bases, the value of the audience, the loyal audience behind these clubs is always more valuable than the club itself. And so bringing that understanding to businesses here in Brazil where you understand, yes, you have to show up with capital because you have to put a competitive team on the field, but really the right way for long-term sustainability is opening up new channels of revenue, becoming global, so that the power of your brand has a global reach, and making a small amount of money across a really big world is a ton of money that comes back to your rosters so you can afford players, you can be sustainable, you can give the fans what they want. I think that kind of sort of thinking is important to these businesses. And so to your question, why Botafogo? Well, when I was looking at these smaller clubs that I thought would be easy to handle, two young men that I've worked with kept bringing up Botafogo. And I'm like, it's like buying Newcastle or Manchester United. Nobody buys Botafogo. I mean, nobody should ever own, these clubs, right? But it happens that we do. So I think an owner, it's just today's caretaker until I die and this club goes 100 years beyond me. But to take on something this big, I think I started to think about it more and more and think it's possible. I think the people at Botafogo are very well organized. They'd embraced this new law. They kicked this into high gear. Last year in the second division, they already began making a lot of the decisions that were necessary to divorce the club from bad business practices in the past and to be a more efficient club going forward. So I'm really not taking on a construction project. I have the great honor of being able to step into this glorious, traditional, big club when a lot of the cleanup work's been already done. They have the momentum of the championship. We have a very short window to bring in our global relationships, our global view of talent, our capital. The transfer window waits for no one. It's going to come very fast. It'll be over. And what you saw at the airport with a bunch of people rooting me to be here, I haven't won anything yet. What you saw there was hope. Nothing to do with me. It was hope. It was a sense for a moment in time. What this government did, what these clubs have done, this move to the SAFs. And to have a chance to come in at the very beginning of that and maybe do it better than they did it in Portugal or other parts of the world, I hope that that excitement, that sense of history that these fans have that caused them to go to the airport that day, now I have to honor that and we've got to deliver and we've got to execute. So.
And sportively speaking, about what happens on the field, do you have goals for the first year, the second year, the third year?
So in terms of my immediate plan, Brazil clubs, by and large, I don't think they invest enough in scouting. I certainly know they don't invest enough in data. I think that we need to bring significant money and people resources to enhance both scouting and scouting driven by data. Anybody can recognize when a young man's feet have been kissed by God, right? I'm smart enough to know that, I saw a young kid out here today who I think his feet have been kissed by God. A couple, actually, so I won't pick favorites. But I think beyond that obvious, when we see those special players, there's everything else. And so we have to have significant global reach and relationships in scouting. I think that the people in Brazil and the team that we intend to strengthen will be very good at identifying the top talent in Brazil. They know who works in the second level. They know who plays well in the first level. And we now have the capital. We're going to be spending at a time where many of the clubs in the first division are not spending. So that's going to give us an advantage on players that are already in the first division that are in transition. It's going to give us an advantage to the extent we have, returning veterans that may still be very top performers on the field that may be playing in Europe, that we may be able to entice to come back home to play for club and country. But I think to be successful this year and in subsequent years, you have to have a global footprint in terms of talent identification. I think what's really terrific about my interests in other clubs is they probably have better data in Europe on players in Brazil than teams in Brazil. You've seen the budgets of some of the big clubs in Europe. There's a lot of feet on the ground here in Brazil that are paid by clubs in Europe. And so we have the ability to tap into that. They have a pretty good sense for the level that I spoke of. I own a small team in Belgium. It gives me access to a certain part of the market in Belgium and France. So what's the level of a top prospect in that region or a first division player in Belgium or France compared to Brazil? That's going to be difficult. The only way you're going to see that is by bringing players from other parts of the world to challenge our existing roster, challenge our players who have come up from the second division and the first division to step up into the first division. And they're going to have to fight for their spots as we are able to buy the rights to new players and bring players in from internationally. But you ask about what my plan is, that part's easy. We have a short amount of time and we've got to get it right. We have to carry the momentum of winning the championship into the momentum of moving up the table in the first division. Now, we may want to win. We may want to finish in the top of the table. Everybody does. But we have to fight and claw as if we are coming in last place in the first division. We have to put everything behind this because we need to win early. And that's not just because it's Botafogo. That's the mentality of every Premier League club. You know, the way you beat relegation and the way you climb the table is by winning your first games, getting a head start in a league, you know, driving into the midseason and finishing strong. So I think the resources, the club was very smart to require things of me that I think are obvious, but they're handing me their baby, so they deserve accountability. And so there are material increases to payroll that are structured in our agreement. There are material increases in the operating expenses across the total organization because we understand that, you know, the organization has to grow and scale and support everything that's happening with the goal to making, you know, the players more successful. So, you know, a lot of that's not public. I think it's going to be public in the very coming days. I think the fans will be very happy with what the club expected of me and the investment we're going to make.
So you can explain like right now how is going to be the investment in the next 10 years or the next 5 years, or is it confidential so far?
It is confidential. It's, you know, it's amazing how much is confidential that's already out on the internet. So, I mean, generally speaking, you know, it's not a one-year thing. The club wanted to see a significant multi-year guarantee of player salaries and of operating expenses and capital investment. So the three sort of principal drivers of success on the field, capital investment in the facilities, in the academies, making this a better place to play. Don't think that doesn't matter, right? I mean, at Crystal Palace, we put millions of dollars into our academy, and the first teamers who are right across the street in very good facilities are now suddenly go to our website. They're now training at the academy because the academy is so nice. So players need support. They depend on facilities, and so the capital expenditures required of us over a multi-year period were a significant part of the contract. As I said, again, the operating expenses, everything from finance to marketing to global footprint in terms of scouting. I think that you cannot hold yourself to a standard as a fan or as an executive and say, hey, we're a big club, pound your chest based on something that happened 20 years ago, unless you really have the resources to be a globally significant football power. And that means having tentacles of scouting and relationships and marketing and strategic partnerships all over the world. I may have come to Brazil to see this Brazil team win and satisfy the thirst of the people in Brazil, but I didn't come to Brazil to manage a microcosmic business that never, you know, realizes the opportunity of that comes from being a globally focused organization.
You mentioned these aged players that may want to come back to Brazil to play for Botafogo and maybe play for Brazilian players, play for the national team, and also that you can scout around the world in Europe. Can we expect this profile of players already in the first year?
Well, I mean, it's really interesting. You know, in the National Football League, you contact a club, you buy the rights to a player, the player has no choice. You know, in football, there's choice. It's a good thing. I think that, you know, I can tell you some of what you see from the fans, like, John, you have to go get this player. John, and by the way, I love on Instagram and Twitter, somebody will say, I love you, I love you, I love you. Thanks for supporting our club. And oh, by the way, if you don't sign this player, you're dead to me. Right? So I understand that the love affair lasts the length of a honeymoon. But that said, there are really, really good ideas of players that have gone on to great things in Europe that still bring a lot to the table when they want to come back home. And they're players that, you know, maybe haven't thought of coming back this early, but maybe this change that's happening in Brazil right now where the Red Bulls of the world are showing up, you know, people like me are showing up. You know, maybe that sort of inspires people to sort of consider their home country as as not just a place you return to at the end of your career, but somewhere that you really truly want to be at the peak of your career. So when I was 28 years old and I had a restaurant franchise and I said, well, let me go hire the chairman of Burger King to work for me, I believed I was going to convince him. So I have that same belief now. I believe I can evangelize, what we are as a club historically and what we're going to be in the future with these great changes and this great investment. And I believe that we will be successful in convincing people to play here because it's an incredible thing to bring titles to Botafogo. Some of the ideas that the fans are throwing out there are terrific. Some of them are pipe dreams, players that are really expensive, and to spend a huge amount of money on one player because of past glory when that money can be spread across 3 strikers and 2 center backs, you've got to be rational about it. That said, what these veterans, to the extent any come back, or they don't have to be veterans from Brazil, they can be people that just want to play here. They bring leadership, they bring wisdom, they bring, the most important thing I think at football is calm, a sense of calmness. The differentiation even among pros about what makes an incredible player and an average player, it's a sense of calm. It's the game slowing down. It's dealing with the moment. And veterans, captains, they bring that. A balance of age and youth. You see it play out so beautifully in so many clubs. So yeah, they can expect us to look for leadership. If it comes with somebody that's also fun, that everybody wants to see come back to Brazil, the fans should know I'm going to seek out those people too. Younger players, honestly, I don't know. The top players that I see in Europe, those might be the top leagues, but sometimes those leagues are the top leagues because they're well organized. They have good TV contracts. The immigration might protect the people within a particular country or region. It doesn't mean that top striker from England can drop into Brazil and light it up. So that we're going to have to test, and you cannot gamble and test them when the season begins. If we can, we'd like to try some of these people early, and please, hopefully no big headlines, about some of the youth that we're going to bring in, because it's going to be part of an education process to understand that when you become a globally focused identifier of talent, we're going to be learning a lot about whether or not those people really, really do make us better. I think our roster, it's 95% from Brazil. It can't be a global football power if you think that talent only comes from one country. So I would say expect us to be very loyal to the game of Brazil and to find the very best of Brazil to play for Botafogo, but expect us to challenge them with the players that we think represent the best of the world.
Since we are here in the training center of the young talents, how big this is in your mind, thinking about the plans of Botafogo for the next 10 years? Can we expect young talents showing up and then being sold with 18, 19 or even 17, 16 years? Is that the idea, or do you plan to use these young talents for a few years in the main team of Botafogo before they leave Brazil?
There's no answer to that question. It's about winning. Just got out of the second division. It's immediately in the rearview mirror. By the way, personally, my style, I typically rip the rearview mirror out of my car, and I don't look back. This club can't look back, but the club has to be very mindful of the risks of, untested talent. You have to take every 3 points. Every 3 points. When you have these games where Palace has seen this a few times, been on top of players and you give up a goal in the last minute and the 3 points turns into 1 point. It all adds up, whether it's protecting you, getting you to safety, or whether it's getting into Libertadores. Every 3 points matters. So can you expect to see young talent coming here? I think if you go on the Crystal Palace website, you'll see a commitment that our chairman made prior to my arrival. I was happy to help my partners finish that. You'll see a commitment to youth. You'll see an investment in youth. You'll see facilities that are important and necessary to the long-term attraction and development of talent, youth talent. And whether that happens here, I'd love it to, or wherever we have facilities, you'll see a significant investment sort of in our academy. You'll see an investment in academies in other parts of the world that are Botafogo branded. The only way you get talent in the other parts of the world is if they know who you are. And you don't get them with marketing material and Instagram posts. You go to where they are, you train them, you identify them, you bring them back here. So that you'll see.
You mentioned very quickly what happened in the airport. So I want you to express a little bit more about what did you feel there, what did you feel there, how was that for you, that experience for you? And one supporter in specifically, even he tried to give you like a 20 reais bill.
Yeah, well, if I understood Portuguese better, I would better understand what a celebrity he's become. I think I wouldn't mind having lunch with him and asking about the whole thing. But so, yeah, first, your question on the emotion. I was very happy that I had a mask. If you see me in the video and I'm grabbing my head, that's me trying to stop myself from having a crying moment in front of 1 million people. It's so emotional. I mean, it's like doing nothing to deserve that adulation, but being the focus of it nonetheless is very emotionally overwhelming. And I cried when I watched Field of Dreams every time I watch it. So I'm not beyond showing emotion, but I was masked, I was behind glass, so I was able to sort of keep it together. There was a little boy, he couldn't have been more than 4, wanted to give me a fist bump and a high five. And so these little moments, it was really special. The gentleman with a 20, honestly, I was getting, literally manhandled. I was getting groped. Somebody was giving me a really nice back rub, right? So, I mean, it was hard to focus on whether that was, reais or euros, or I know it wasn't dollars, but I wasn't sure why I should take his money. I think I came here to invest money, not extract money. So, I don't know. Can you tell me what was...
He was trying to give you a gift.
He was?
Yeah. Because it's a Brazilian currency, you probably don't have it, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So he was trying to give you like a souvenir.
I did not come here to take money. I came here to leave money, right? So, but I think he did give me the best souvenir. He gave me a memory. They last much longer than currency.
And did you see the meme of the $20 bill with your face?
No.
Yeah, there's also on the internet. Yeah, that's true.
No, that's only for the Queen and dead prime ministers. And yeah. But yeah, please, somebody send me that one. I'll tell my kids I'm important somewhere in the world because they don't seem to get the message.
SAF has an obligation to pay up to 20% of this revenue to address the enormous debt that Botafogo has contracted along the years. Did not scare you a bit, this kind of this construction, this debt?
If I were to look at the revenues of a club in Brazil, a business in Brazil, like as a football team, yeah, that debt would scare me. But as I said before, the audience of the club is worth far more than the club. And what I mean to say by that is I'm not just making one of these sort of spiritual sort of, sound bites. In my business, I've principally engaged in human likeness, celebrity likeness, consumer likeness, the idea that our likeness is our asset. And all around the world, billions of people are now activating their own likenesses into different technology-driven consumer apps that are incredibly lucrative, incredibly scalable. And now even more, this concept that I used to play around with a lot in the mid-90s called the metaverse. It's been resurrected and it's now popular again. I'm glad that, the bell bottoms I used to wear back in the 70s are coming back into style in a technology sense. But what's happening with audience and what's happening with technology-driven, very efficient consumer apps is without it being exploitive, we're able to engage with audience and engage with consumers in ways that are really, really lucrative. And the most efficient way to to attract those audiences and to reach them is through organizations where the loyalty is pre-established. So you look at Manchester United, it's a publicly traded company. Their revenues largely don't grow. I would say that's one of the greatest underachievers in the world of sport, to have such an audience with such loyalty and these people that live and die and bleed red. But there's nothing happening in the business model of Manchester United that's really connecting to that. We had an app at my company, FaceBank. Women would scan their face and it would become an augmented reality, a digital map of their face, and they could see what they look like in different forms of makeup. And this one app made $30 million US and 20 million in profits, and it was just one app. We have an app that we've been trying out in different athletic environments. It's called our Fan of the Match app. Fans will scan their face and they can pick different face paint and Botafogo or Crystal Palace. And when we tested that app in college football, we had 35 million downloads of people scanning their face to see what they look like, engaging with their team. So your likeness, you can scan your face and put yourself into a video game. You can use it for makeup or sunglass try-on. You can use it to get closer to your team. I'm not to talk to you about business at all, but the point being, like, if I was looking at a football organization with 30 million US in revenues, which is kind of where Botafogo might be, somebody's going to correct me on that number. So it's, yeah, I'd be very worried about that debt. But this scale, of a club, the millions of fans, the opportunity to do something, where there is passion and where there is spirit, there is extension and there's growth and there's global scalability. So I think the value of this organization goes way beyond the income statement that is limited, very, very limited, in a constrained economy where the television contract is minimal, where the merchandise sales are, it's going back to the same fans again and again and trying to sell them another T-shirt. When I think we've learned about Botafogo fans, they already have a lot of T-shirts. So, so I view it as much bigger than the economics suggest, and that's not a lot of debt in a global business model. It's a lot of debt to a club here, and what the government's done is they put this beautiful law in place so the wolves are not at the door. I have a fixed amount that's very easy and affordable for us to pay. And all of the cleanup work, where in the world has the government doesn't do much good for us up in the United States, but down here, they've cleaned it all up for us. I just get to come and look to the future.
Your professional life has been connected to media and technology, and I heard you saying in a podcast, that you see every club as a media company these days, like that supplies its fans and audience with punctual events, the match day. And you were thinking about harvesting the other days, I think. Is this the way to provide the fans or to harvest the fans in other days of the week?
Well, I really, really detest sort of, internet marketing. When I was very young, I had a company called Art Technology Group. And they were one of the companies that really invented personalization, which is, we now know it as the cookies that come onto our computer and they understand everything we do. And so, I certainly profited from the development of a lot of those personalization tools to better understand the consumers that engage through a web interface. But it's very irritating too at the same time. So no, the fans cannot expect us to just bombard them with new ways to make money. I think when you start thinking about content and media, it becomes voluntary. Like if you capture these incredible stories, like the Netflix, documentary on Sunderland, or shameless plug, When Eagles Dare about Crystal Palace, which is a club that went through a near collapse and got promoted. When you start thinking about the content, the stories, the emotion of a club, and you can package that, that is a voluntary consumer kind of experience where if you put something out there that they'll enjoy, they'll come, they'll pay. It'll be, I think, little micro payments spread across a lot of content in media and technology-driven consumer apps that people enjoy, but you cannot just pound them with promotions. You have to take the spirit and the heart, everything that made those fans show up, faces against the glass, people having to be a part of this moment, that's content, right? It made me cry. Well, okay, so what does that mean? Did you see this B-level movie called Goal, where the kid crosses the border to get into the United States and he ends up playing for Newcastle? Great movie, right? I mean, it's probably critically would never win an Academy Award. By me saying publicly it's a great movie, I'm going to drop down a level in kind of, my reputation in film. But still, these stories about sport, about people, about accomplishment, about challenge, about failure, I view everything in life as a content play.
The multi-club ownership is a world trend right now and what appears you are following. But how Botafogo fits on that global strategy?
Just to complement John, I think the Botafogo supporters, of course, are a little bit worried about. Everybody says that maybe John Textor is coming to Brazil just to farm some talent and go around the world selling it, or making a supplier to Crystal Palace thing. Yeah. How do you respond to that?
The multi-club thing. Honestly, I don't think anybody's ever put together a combination of clubs. You know the other clubs that I'm interested in investing in, and these are all top-tier clubs. Have we ever seen a Premier League club in England, a Premier League club in Brazil? My partner, with whom I'm not, directly coordinating, David Blitzer, just bought, Real Salt Lake. That's a relationship. That's not a multi-club ownership, but David and I are obviously partners with Josh and Steve at Crystal Palace, and so we now have a collaboration opportunity with his clubs. He owns Real Salt Lake. He owns FC Augsburg, top division in Germany. I'm having fun with you following. At Manchester City, the City Football Group hasn't put together this kind of combination of top clubs. There's a lot reported in the press down here. They call it the failed attempt to buy Benfica. There's no failure about it at all, still very actively in motion. It was disruption that happened at Benfica in particular that caused everybody to sort of, take stock of what they needed to do internally and elect a new leadership and then re-engage with me. And so to the extent, the Botafogo family can, add collaboration with a partners club or with a club like Benfica, should I end up taking a significant interest there? There never has been a combination of top-tier clubs like this. So that addresses the second question. Is it going to be, here's the other F word, feeder, right? We have to stay away from, these are horrible words. No club should ever be a feeder to another club. This is its own country, these people, they have their own passions, they have their own history. I can't hijack that and say, I'm going to take all of your best and send them to Crystal Palace. Like, why would I do that? It's a fear. It's a rational fear, but it's not a logical fear because when you're talking about the collaboration of top-tier clubs, I think there's more opportunity to use this global footprint and these shared resources to efficiently access talent. For me to pick up the phone, as I have several times in the last week, and ask the sporting director at Crystal Palace, because I know he has data on him. I know he's watched his games. What do you think of this player? Too old, too young, too untested? 86% of his mid-range passes are complete, while at the same time having the highest percentage of goal and assist involvement of any player within his division. That's all good stuff for Botafogo. So I talked many times about having a global footprint of talent identification. That's the benefit you get from multi-club ownership. You have to get as much as you give in this equation. Now, back to this idea that players matter. It's their choice. I didn't create a situation in Brazil where one player wants to leave to go to Europe and test himself, and another player wants to come back home and win for his country. That's in their hearts, in their ambitions, and it's all independent of what our strategy might be. What we can do with this global organization is see and touch and feel and communicate and approach that talent to really understand where those players are in their glide path in life and where it intersects with our glide path as a club. So I think if Botafogo, I guess this is a message to every one of our competitors in the top division. Like, you know, think about it. If Botafogo becomes recognized as a place where you can go and you can play at the highest level within your country, you can get recognized by your country and play for the national team. If you help this team win, you can win in the Libertadores. And should you dream that you want to go play in the Champions League or you want to play in the Premier League, that Botafogo is your path to getting there, getting to Benfica, getting to Crystal Palace, what does that make us? I have chills on this one. This makes us the best recruiter of talent in this country, and that's what we have to be. Because who else is going to offer that glide path and that mobility for players and all that they might imagine they can be? I want us to be recognized as the best place for people to be if you are the best player in this country, because we provide you with the best opportunities.
When did you study Brazilian football? What did you find here? What do you think of us? And what do you think
Marta and Ronaldo.
Good answer, yeah.
I mean, what do you study about Brazilian football? Like I'm 55, right? So
also as a business opportunity and how we organize our football here, also in comparison to what Europe does right now.
We don't have a league, yeah. There's no there's like nothing similar to Premier League here.
Yeah.
We have like a national championship that is organized by a football confederation.
Well, you don't call it a league, but it's certainly a league. What you don't have, most countries don't have, is the kind of cooperation among owners that they have in the Premier League. So, you know, why is the Premier League the best league in the world? Well, they're very historic, so is Brazil. They're very organized. You know, most countries are not. The owners in the Premier League get together and they may not like each other. Many of them do like each other. But they all work very, very well together, and they organize, and they have massive, massive coordination on television, on media, and they share the money very equitably. You know, you don't have this situation where the top teams make all the money and the bottom teams suffer. I tell this to people in Portugal all the time, you know. I mean, they believe they have to win every year. Well, guess what? That makes for a very bad league when the top three teams always win. What makes the Premier League so special, obviously the same relegation challenges that they have other parts of the world, but that Leicester City can get promoted, and the same year they get promoted, they can win. Well, that's not going to happen with Estoril. You know, got promoted this year. They're doing great. That's also David's team, my partner. That's got to happen. It's got to be possible, right? And so the way that's possible is if the money is equitably distributed. In the Premier League, you know, you're rewarded for placing higher. But generally, even the team that finishes in 17th makes a significant amount of revenue off of the television contract. So that kind of equity in the sharing of revenues is one of the reasons that the Premier League is so strong. But I'm told you don't call it a league here. It's certainly it's everything that we have in other parts of the world. There's relegation.
There will be a negotiation in the next 2 years as the new contract of the Brazilian Championship. And one of the problems is exactly equity, or this equilibrium that's not present here. For a long time, some teams earn a lot more than the others. And this is probably will be a challenge to change, because the team with more supporters like Flamengo and Corinthians, they still believe that they have to have a lion's share of the television. Are you aware of this kind of challenge?
Yeah, I think what I could bring to the table. So there's a business that I had. I was the largest shareholder of a company called FUTEBOL TV up in the U.S. And I guess the simple way is to call it like the Netflix of sports. Although we did have, many other entertainment programs. It was founded by David Gandler, wonderful former college soccer player. Actually, I meant to say a wonderful person who happened to be a college soccer player. I don't know how good he was as a soccer player. But it started as a soccer streaming business. And he realized you could only get so many hours a week of consumers' time if you're just showing their favorite football clubs. And so he expanded over time. And ultimately, I was able to buy that business with my company, Face Bank, and become David's partner. And certainly I feel from my experience in, content, in, feature films, visual effects, truly high-end production values, light and lens and texture is what makes, one piece of content feel very different than another. Combined with my technology past, my experience with Fubo, which is all about the efficient propagation of that content through a delivery platform, it's very dynamic. Being able to watch 4 pictures in one, being able to have your betting in a different panel if that's legally allowed, being able to interact, not the way we've seen in the past, but richly in volumetric experiences. So what I'd like to bring to Brazil, I don't care how big they are, and I don't care that they might be the enemy on the field, but they're our friend when we talk about exporting the product of Brazil football to the world, so it's got to look better. The beautiful, beautiful, beautiful people, men and the women in Brazil that make up the audience, not only in the stadium, but on the streets. I mean, this all has to be part of the story so that people see the power of football in Brazil. These dramatic images that I see more and more every day of the fans, the incredible reaction, the energy, that's all content. We don't have that energy in the Premier League. I mean, you've got really, really terrific fans, but my God, what happens here is at another level. So Western production values, television broadcasting, technology that sort of drives content delivery, making people understand how good it is here, how beautiful it is here, what this country looks like. Because why do they care about La Liga, or why do they care about the Premier League? The product on the field is largely the same. It's the production values, the method by which we distribute this to the world that's different. So I think we can take the best teams of Brazil, take some trips, go to other parts of the world, destroy some people in Europe, prove to them that Brazil football is still everything that they remember it to be, but we need to make it look better, and we need to distribute it to the world, and we need to convince the other major clubs that they have a duty beyond their P&L to this country to export the brand of Brazil football for everybody's benefit. So I think they're business people. That little company, Fubo, in August of 2018, look at our balance sheet. We had $80,000 on the balance sheet. 3 years later, when I left, we had a $9 billion valuation. That's what technology driving content can do, and that's a lot more valuable than what people might be hanging on to in these old clubs to keep their money closest to them. We have to expand revenues, we have to export the brand of Brazil football through this, what largely looks like a league. As an opportunity, the fact that all this isn't already defined and segmented, that's why I enjoy being here. Because what you find in other leagues in the world, they still have the big dinosaur media companies that show up and they bid for their survival. They have to buy the Premier League, otherwise they're going to lose everything else. Well, that gets in the way of progress. It's hard to convince those leagues to walk away from that easy money to accept this great new technology and future. But when you come to a place like Brazil, where the associations are all becoming SAFs and outside capital is just coming in, this is the beginning, of a moment where all of the new ways of doing things, can be put into play. And so I hope, as a caretaker of Botafogo and as a co-owner with the club of Botafogo, to actually teach these other clubs how it should be built for the future.
What's your impression of the physical structure of Botafogo up until now?
Well, my reaction to coming here, this has got to be one of the most beautiful places to sort of play football on earth. It's old, it's rustic, the buildings need work, but God's done his job, right? So we have to do ours. we have to get the standard of our facilities up to the divine standard that surrounds us. I think what's going to be interesting, I talked to one of my partners about a player that I thought would be good for the team down here, and he said, well, that's a big ask, to ask him to leave London and to go to Brazil, right? I mean, he didn't say it like that, not at all. But that's kind of what he means. Like, there are players in the Premier League, they're pampered and they have beautiful locker rooms and they drive great cars and they go to the restaurants here are fabulous, but the facilities are incredible in the Premier League, incredible. And some players will come here, if we bring a bunch of them, if we organize a friendly with some other club, there will be some percentage of those players that come here and go, God, we have players at Manchester City that don't like coming to Selhurst Park for the same reason, you know. And but there will be other players that come here and just feel the authenticity, that it's not about that building, it's about this pitch, right? It's about these people. It's about Ipanema. It's about who they might meet. It's about Rio. It's about an adventure. They're young people too. How do you know how they're going to react until you put them on a plane and you bring them here and say, there are 50,000 people in this stadium that want to see you play, and when you leave at the end of the day, you're in Rio, right? There's a certain number of people that are going to love that, and it's my job to expose them to that and hope that, not in addition to the talent that we develop and identify here in Brazil, that we can, you know, make this an international draw. So I think the facilities, you know, obviously you can show up at the stadium and, yeah, look, I'll probably want to put a fresh coat of paint on a few things, but it's what happens on the field that matters. So I think the facilities are fine. I think they'll improve. Again, look at the leadership of my partner, Crystal Palace, and what he did with the academy there. There's some really great video on the Crystal Palace website of the facilities. So if you want to know what my standard is, you know, expect to see us trying to emulate as much as possible about the standard of other great clubs in Europe.